Well, welcome in, everybody. It is something new that we are trying as part of college basketball coast to coast in our coverage, whether it be in podcast form, live form, etc. It is the Saturday Nightcap, and hopefully you are seeing us. And at a later time, you may be hearing us as well in podcast form, etc. And so this is great stuff here because I'm looking forward to talking college hoops all throughout everything that's going to happen here as part of college basketball coast to coast, whether, again, we're doing live games, shows, etc. And I am going to welcome in right away on the program. Again, if you're seeing us, you already see Jason Powers, one of my Tampa Bay brothers from another mother. He is possibly as big a college basketball fan as I am, and that's saying something. So who better to kick off the first Saturday nightcap that I'm going to be doing, where we regularly take a look at what went on what is traditionally the biggest day for college basketball down the stretch of the season, especially heading to March, than to have Jason Powers with me. He's based here in West Central Florida, where I am. Brother Powers, thank you for jumping aboard, and we've got lots to discuss. First of all, I know you're excited like I am because this thing appears to be wide open with any number of teams that can contend, and maybe like 6, 8, maybe even 10 teams that could win the whole thing. I think that. Welcome in. What do you think about how wide open all of this appears to be as we wrap up January and head towards March?
We'll like this. It's Saturday night, and speaking of wide open, who do you got in the Royal Rumble tonight in Tampa? The Royal Rumble in St. Pete. And wide open, we got a Royal WWE Royal Rumbles at Tropicana Field on a Saturday night.
I got to tell the folks that my day began this morning. Everybody begins their day at whatever time. Mine began very early today because we had junior varsity basketball, high school basketball with my twin sophomore teenage girls. So my day began before 7 a.m. We had to drive an hour to play the doubleheader games. All right, so long morning. Been watching a lot of college hoops. There've been a lot of other things going on. The Gasparilla, the big holiday parade festival, was going on in downtown Tampa. I had no time to pay attention or partake in that. I have no idea about the WWE Royal Rumble and what the result is, but there's 40,000 plus in the home of the Tampa Bay Rays tonight. So we got mayhem in our area. There is no doubt. That's what you're referring to. We got craziness.
Yes, but to your question, wide open field if you look at the college basketball world. The good thing is we got a good mix of blue bloods. We got Carolina, Kansas, Purdue, Houston in the mix. And then you got some off-the-radar teams, a team like Dayton, who had a big game today in the A-10. Got a lot of teams. You got a St. John's team. I don't know if they played today or not, but a team that's building some momentum with Rick Pitino. So a lot of great storylines as we get to the end of January.
No doubt. So let's go over some things that have already happened today involving the most prominent teams. You mentioned Kansas and their loss at Iowa State. Iowa State just outplayed them, Jason Powers. Iowa State came out of the locker room and made 7 consecutive three-point attempts. It wasn't 7 straight shots, but 7 straight made trays for them, helped break the game open, get them up by double figures. They hung on at the end. So Bill Self's team is now 3-4 in the Big 12, and that is the worst start he has ever had at Kansas in the Big 12. So go figure that, and that is an amazingly deep league as it is. Give me a quick thought on Kansas, and then we're going to talk about how deep that conference is here on Saturday Nightcap. But what about the Jayhawks? They get humbled again. West Virginia got them last week in Morgantown. Iowa State got them today in Ames.
Just watching Kansas, I don't see an elite big. I mean, they've got good players all over the place, but I don't see that player of the year kind of candidate at Kansas this year. Good players, good team, and going to Hilton Coliseum. You and I both know Iowa State's one of the sneakier, tough places to win a game on the road in that conference, and they always beat these giant killers in Hilton Coliseum. But again, Kansas has been in this spot in previous years where they've gotten off to a so-so start, and they always tend to be there at the end, though, come conference play.
Again, we are hanging out here as part of Saturday Nightcap. That's the voice of Jason Powers if you're only hearing us. Come see us. Come find us through YouTube, College Basketball Coast to Coast, on Twitter as well, CBB Coast to Coast. I just retweeted that also. So the social media platforms are out there. I shared it as well on my personal Facebook page. You got various ways to see it. You may be hearing it later in podcast form. We're going to do this on Saturday nights and do it live. No, we're not Eddie Murphy, Chevy Chase, and all the great Saturday Night Live folks. We're not doing it Saturday Night Live like sketch comedy, but we're doing Saturday NightCap here, and we'll do this live tonight. You were partaking in what was an amazing, like, 5-act play between TCU and Baylor.
Yes.
I gotta confess, I did not get to see that game again with the JV basketball, my travels back, etc. But that game took like a week to play out. Tell me about TCU and Baylor in the Big 12.
I was in and out of that game, and I know Baylor hit a three-pointer at the end of regulation with like a half a second left to send the game to overtime. They ended up going 3 overtimes. I think it was the old Duke-Kentucky score. Was it 103-102 back in the Duke-Kentucky 1992 regional final score with back in the day? So 103-102 triple overtime. Great game. And by the way, Big 12 wise, was there a cheating scandal question? A cheating question that Iowa State Kansas game? I missed that. So fill me in. What was the controversy?
It was not in this game, but in the Kansas State game midweek. That apparently Jerome Tang, the Kansas State coach, was upset because they saw what they believe were a couple of reserve players and or a member of the Iowa State staff sitting to the right of their bench, videotaping their bench and their hand signals. Here we go again. And Jerome Tang was upset about it. They've been trying to keep it under wraps between he and the Iowa State coach, TJ Otzenberger, but that's a very interesting byproduct. By the way, you were making mention of the final score of that TCU Baylor game. It finished 105-102, 29-26 in the 3 overtimes. For that game today. If I said to you, though, who's leading the Big 12 right now? We know it's not Kansas, and I'll give you a hint. It's not Iowa State.
Ain't Baylor.
It's not Baylor. How about Texas Tech has won 11 of 12 games, and they won at Oklahoma today. They lead the Big 12 right now. That conference is just an all-out brawl right now between these different teams, and that doesn't even include like BYU, Texas. And I know Texas and Oklahoma are leaving eventually, Jason, for the SEC. But, I mean, TCU in this conference, and how about the Houston Cougars? I am full of all kinds of stats and nuggets tonight. Houston put the sleeper hold on Kansas State earlier this afternoon and held them down to, 52 points in the game. Multiple choice question for Jason Powers. The Houston Cougars now this season have played 20 games. What's the number of games where the opponent has not scored 70 points in the game? Your multiple choice is 10 times the opponent has not gotten to 70. Not the answer. All 20 times the opponent has not gotten to 70. Or let's go right in the middle. 15 times the opponent has not gotten to 70 against the Houston Cougars. What would your guess be after what Houston did to Kansas State today, 74-52? Is it 10 times, 20 times, or 15 times that an opponent has not gotten to 70 points against Houston?
Had you not given me choices, I probably would have picked 18, but I'm going to go 15.
How about
my guess?
How about all 20? Nobody scored 70 points on them all year. No one has scored 70 points on the Houston Cougars. They look every bit a Final Four team. Again, I don't know who emerges from that conference as the conference tournament champion, but whoever it is going to have to go through, wouldn't you say, at least a couple of teams that could be Final Four teams when it's all said and done, Jason?
Yes, absolutely. No doubt. The one thing I always worry about with Houston is their offense. Can they score enough? We know they defend. They know they play with great effort. Kelvin Sampson, all the great things he's done. I always worry about, can they score in those Sweet 16, Elite 8 kind of games? Can they score enough to win? But you're right. I mean, that conference, you could make an argument for 3 or 4 teams that go to the Final Four easily.
All right, 2 or 3 other things, and then we're going to get to another guest with us on college basketball coast to coast. He's standing by. He's waiting in the wings. He's in the green room. He's enjoying,
Royal Rumble. He's waiting for the ring to go for the next Royal Rumble contestant.
Are we going to ring the bell and he's the next guy to run down the aisle and come in the ring in the Royal Rumble? That again is in Tampa Bay. It could be. our next guest that will be with us in a couple of moments. Stand by for that. SEC basketball of note in the SEC. So again, I'm having lunch with the family, my sister, my brother-in-law, the twins, their friends, my wife. I'm looking at the Florida Gators handle Georgia all through the second half, winning by 20. Only until later, when we got in the car and left and got home, did I realize that Georgia overcame a 21-point deficit and pushed that game into overtime before Florida eventually won it. And again, some other SEC results while we're talking about this. We saw Mississippi State beat Auburn. That's two straight losses for Auburn to Alabama and Mississippi State on the road after they had been ranked in the top 10. We saw Alabama tonight put a C note on LSU and win. We saw Tennessee losing at the half at Vanderbilt. This kid, Dalton Knecht, is something else, Jason Powers. They come roaring back. Knecht scored 12 straight points himself in the second half to help them come back and win. Say something about the SEC here as I touch on this Saturday NightCap show on college basketball. Coach, go say something about the SEC real quick.
And Kentucky went to Arkansas to win. I know Arkansas is not great this year, but that's still a tough place to win. One thing I've been impressed with about the SEC this year, how many scores and games have we seen in the 80s and the 90s? Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida. There's been a lot of high-scoring games, and that's, again, there's always a couple teams in every conference every year that scores a bunch, but it seems like this year there's more and more scoring throughout the SEC, a lot of 80s and 90s kind of games, especially like a team like Kentucky not playing any defense here lately, have given up 90 to Georgia. Florida scoring a bunch of points. Georgia's given up a bunch of points. So offense seems to be the theme for me early on in this SEC season.
There is no doubt about that. Let's stick with the eastern part of the country. How about North Carolina wins at Florida State? They had some trouble. They eventually overcame Florida State, got a couple of stops, hit their free throws, ended up winning the game. Did you know, Jason Powers, I'm full of the stats of the Nuggets, they're 9-0 in the ACC. Carolina, they have not been 9-0 since the 2001 ACC season. Hello, 23 years ago. So Carolina off to a great start. I know there's going to be controversy over the Duke finish with Clemson. Clemson up 1. Duke and Tyrese Proctor, the point guard, driving towards the lane. I thought it was a clear foul. Clemson is still upset. Hours later, Ben Bromell, the coach, is upset. I mean, what do you expect? You're not going to get calls in Cameron. I mean, if it's a Duke player and they get breathed on heavily, they're going to get the call in the final second. And Proctor still had to hit both free throws to win the game by 1. He did. Thoughts on the ACC real quick, including Carolina and the Duke finish?
I heard was there some controversy about whether the foul happened on the floor, whether it was a shooting foul? Because a couple buddies of mine were texting me
bumped him and
whether it was a shooting foul.
Right. Okay. They bumped him and they didn't call it. He then immediately elevated with under a second left, and it's clearly a foul on the arm. Forget your Clemson orange bias and your orange glasses. It's clearly a foul. I know Clemson was upset after the 2 made free throws. They threw a long inbound with a second left. Their players falling over a Duke player. There's no call. You're not going to get the calls at Cameron, right? Jason Powers, period.
And I'll give you a little nugget, a little North Carolina, Florida State history book nugget. I was in the building 1993, the first time Florida State ever beat North Carolina when they entered the ACC. The first time they'd ever beaten Carolina in that conference. Byron Wells from the corner hits a 3 back with Charlie Ward, Sam Cassell, Bob Sura, and that crew. The first ever time they beat Carolina in the Leon County Civic Center.
Storm the court? Did you storm the court that night?
No, but I stormed the bar scene in Tallahassee post game. It was a Sunday night. It was a Sunday night in Tallahassee. I remember because I was there the first time they ever. But Florida State and give Carolina credit. I like that Carolina's back to being the power of the ACC again. All the hoopla about teams leaving the conference. Good for Hubert Davis. I know they got a veteran team there, but they've got a team that looks like they can make a long run too with depth as far as front court and guard play.
Love Jason Powers' insight. Follow him at JPO Sports, the Powers on Sports podcast. He's part of College Basketball Coast to Coast. as is this individual. He is not running down the ring like the Royal Rumble. Hello, Matt Zemek, who is the West Coast Bureau Chief on all that we do with college basketball coast to coast. Matt joining us from the Phoenix area, where it's a little earlier on Saturday evening. Hey, listen, thank you for popping on the Saturday Nightcap. I know you're busy with many different things. I don't know if it was punishment, if it was somewhat enjoyable to watch, but UCLA put it on USC. Matt writes for the Trojans Wire website, USA Today's Trojans Wire USC website. The Bruins went into the Galen Center and were never really threatened in the second half of that Pac-12 game. Matt Zemek, welcome on College Basketball Coast to Coast to the Saturday Nightcap. We're doing this live, my friend, on the fly. How are you?
Well, the less said about USC men's basketball, the better. Women's basketball, that's a very different thing. And, Juju Watkins is poised to take the baton from Caitlin Clark. When Caitlin Clark goes to the WNBA, Juju's going to be the star in women's college basketball. So I have that to look forward to the next few years. But USC men's basketball just went right into a ditch. And, Isaiah Collier's hurt and he's out. And, that's not good. That doesn't help USC. But let's remember, last year was an NCAA tournament team with Boogie Ellis, with Kobe Johnson, with Vincey Nwachukwu. They're all there. They're all playing, and they can't figure anything out. They are last. They are dead last. Oregon State beat Arizona State tonight. USC at 2-7 in the league is 12th alone. It was a tie with Oregon State heading into today, and now USC is number 12 by itself.
What's your quick answer? What's your quick answer? Is it chemistry problems? Are they tuning out Andy Enfield? Is it a combination of things? Why, with those existing players, is it this bad?
It's Enfield. And, here's the thing. Enfield has been good for USC basketball. When he took over the program in 2013, there was zero buzz, zero consistency around the program, and he made USC better. He made 4 straight NCAA tournaments if you count the 2020 pandemic season. That's never happened at USC. So, over the 10 and a half years that he's been at USC, he's done a good job. He's been good for USC basketball. But this was the year with a Cadillac lineup with elite talent. He got elite groceries. He went to Whole Foods, not to 7-Eleven. He got, prime choice meats, cheeses, fruits and vegetables. And he was supposed to make a gourmet meal. He was supposed to get a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. He was supposed to contend for the Pac-12. And by the way, the Pac-12 is awful this year. Every team has at least 3 losses in the conference. So given that, USC should be at the top of the league right now. And yet USC is last. And so Enfield, he's great with the worker bee guys. He's great with the grunt guys. The Chavez Goodwins, the Drew Petersons, the elbow grease guys. But in terms of elite Cadillac talent, he can't do it. Gonzo, USC needs a new coach. Heading into the Big Ten is just, thank you for your service, Mr. Enfield. You've done a good job over 10 and a half years. But now USC needs to find its own version of, Mick Cronin coming in for Steve Alford. That was the upgrade UCLA needed to get to the Final Four and get some elite teams. And I know it's awful at UCLA this year too, but UCLA's had 3 knockout seasons the past 3 years. Final Four, couple Sweet 16s, couple high-end NCAA seats. UCLA is still fundamentally where it's supposed to be. This year's been bad, but on balance, Cronin's been very good. It's time for USC to get its own upper-tier head coach. That's where the Trojans stand.
That's the voice of Matt Zemek. Follow him at Matt Zemek, Zemek. And I am very appreciative of him popping on. And I'm only going to keep you a couple more minutes because he also, in his many travails, is keeping track of tennis and the Australian Open, which they're playing in the middle of the night, U.S. time. So Matt is readying for the men's final at the U.S. Open, at the Australian Open. And there's no confirmation that USC fans want Andy Enfield launched on the first plane to Australia right now with how bad it is for the Trojans. Hey, Arizona got back on their feet. They lost on a last-second three-pointer Thursday night at Oregon State, like you referenced. They got back on their feet and won today against Oregon in a game that was probably bigger for Oregon. They needed the win for credibility, for the bubble, for the at-large hopes. Arizona put it on them. What do you make of that? and anything else out of the Pac-12 that has stood out here this weekend?
So with this Arizona-Oregon result, what happened was Caleb Love went into flamethrower mode. And, like when Caleb Love is just making everything left and right, Arizona's tough. But it begs the question, right? What happens when Caleb Love isn't in flamethrower mode? And I draw a comparison with Tennessee. When Dalton Connect is not in flamethrower mode, when he's not hitting everything, where does Tennessee get its offense? Like Tennessee and Arizona, like when their star scorers are going, wow, look out. But you can't depend on one guy scoring 25, 30, 35 every game in the NCAA tournament. You're going to have nights when other opposing defenses take him away. So that's the thing with Arizona. When Caleb Love is in God mode, they're tough. But when he's not, this is not a good defensive team. Umar Ballo has been getting exposed at the defensive end of the floor. He's not quick enough to handle a lot of these other bigs that he's going up against. I mean, let's keep in mind, Arizona almost lost to a bad UCLA team at home a week ago, then plays with its boot against Oregon State, lost to Stanford by 18. Stanford just lost to Cal. Stanford's a bad team. And Arizona just got thumped by Stanford, also lost at Washington State. I mean, I've grown up in the state of Arizona, followed Arizona basketball a very long time, since Lute in the late 80s, Sean Elliott, Sean Rooks, a guy named Steve Kerr, 1988. I've followed this program for a long time. I know how this movie ends. Arizona's a 3 seed, gets shipped to the Southeast region, and a 14 seed knocks them out. Like that, this team fits that profile. Like we're going to have another Princeton moment from last year. Unless Arizona gets really serious about defense and can become consistent at that end of the floor, we're looking at another early exit for Tommy Lloyd. And coaches around the country seem to be identifying how to expose his defense. So he has some really serious adjustments to make. One win over Oregon doesn't really fix things. I mean, in Oregon and Dana Altman in danger of missing their 3rd straight NCAA tournament. It's just been a very difficult, rough year for the Pac-12 in general.
What's interesting is the Final Four is in Arizona, in the greater Phoenix area in Glendale, Arizona, coming up this April. And it was 7 years ago, 2017, that Dana Altman had Oregon in the Final Four in Arizona. And right now the Final Four might as well be on Pluto for Oregon. They may not even get in the tournament, like you're saying. Jason Powers, I've been utilizing Matt Zimick here. Do you have something for Matt Zimick or something else to add? I'll bring you back in here on the Saturday NightCap.
I want a quick question about the USC beat. Give us an assessment, because from what I've seen the couple times I've watched, I've not seen anything special out of Bronny James. Give us an assessment where Bronny James is at after playing on that team for 8 or 10, 12 games, whatever it's been. Because I've not seen anything that's made me say, man, this kid's a surefire first-round draft pick in the NBA.
There was the hope that Bronny would play with Isaiah Collier a lot, and with Collier injured, we're not really seeing that. And the blueprint, the ideal vision was for Collier to drive and kick and create catch-and-shoot 3-point opportunities for Bronny. We're not able to see that because Collier's hurt. But that having been said, Bronny is not lighting it up. Like the idea that he would be a 3-and-D guy, that was supposed to be the identity. That was supposed to be the role for Bronny, because USC's been a notoriously bad 3-point shooting team under Andy Enfield for several years. So Bronny was supposed to fit the 3-and-D. He's done the D, but not the 3, so like his defense, his effort, that's all there. That's been good. But like the USC needed a reliable 3-point shooter. That's what it needed at the offensive end of the floor with Bronny James, and the Trojans aren't getting it. And I just have to say, like, is LeBron going to insist on pushing Bronny into the NBA draft? I mean, here's the thing. So is an NBA team going to pick Bronny just because that means they get LeBron as part of a package deal? I mean, maybe you do it, but in terms of Bronny James providing value to an NBA roster by himself, just sizing up him as an NBA prospect, he doesn't pass the sniff test Like it's
Not
not
even
even close.
close.
He
Not
has
yet.
to have another year of college basketball to improve his draft stock. I would not draft him. There are only 2 rounds. There are only 60 some odd players. I wouldn't draft him right now. He's not ready for the league.
It's not even
but
close.
yet,
It's not even a
if you
debate.
get
I agree.
if you get LeBron James with Bronny, then sure. But Bronny
Hey,
by
look,
himself.
you know what
no
I
way.
just thought of, and I'm going to bring symmetry in your life. O.J. Simpson, USC Trojan, Heisman Trophy winner, and I know we're going way back, and insert your punchlines here. This is his football career. O.J. goes to the Buffalo Bills, and the Buffalo Bills are awful. And you know what he did? He convinced them to draft Al Cowlings with their first-round pick because basically Al was his best friend. Not because Al deserved to be a first-round pick. And oh, what a best friend he turned out to be with the Bronco chase about 25 years later. But that actually happened in the early 70s. So as much as we say it's ridiculous that an NBA team would take Bronny James as a draft pick, the son of LeBron James, to get LeBron James on their team, it ain't that crazy. And it involved a USC situation 50 years ago in the NFL draft where something like that happened. I'm just looking here on the last 5 game logs for Bronny James, and Matt knows this from TrojansWire.com, the USA Today Trojans Wire website. Bronny James tonight, 2 points against UCLA. Bronny James the other night against Arizona State, actually a week ago, 7. 11 points against Arizona, no points against Colorado, no points against Washington State. Did you hear me say 2-0 and 0 in 3 of the last 5 games that he's played? That's not an NBA draft pick, the way that he looks. So I think we've thoroughly covered that. Matt, I know you've got to go in a moment or two. You're kind of the West Coast bureau chief. What's interesting is the Mountain West right now with the likes of San Diego State, who made the Final Four last year, but teams like Utah State and New Mexico and Colorado State. I'm going to probably leave somebody out. Mountain West.
How about Gonzaga? Gonzaga?
Well, Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference, but the Mountain West Conference could have 4 or 5 teams in, while the Pac-12 maybe only gets a couple of teams in. I mean, that's an amazing statement for, I guess, the strength of the Mountain West and what's wrong with the Pac-12. Say something about that real quick.
And, assuming that St. Mary's and Gonzaga play in the West Coast Conference Tournament Championship game, that might be the only bid the WCC gets.
Wow.
Like Gonzaga might have an at-large case. St. Mary's does not, for sure. But Gonzaga is a bubble team. I mean, Gonzaga is right on the cut line as a bubble team. So the West Coast Conference, I mean, if Gonzaga wins the West Coast Conference tournament, that's the only bid from that league. So pretty shocking. And, with the Pac-12, like Colorado was supposed to have a loaded roster. Eddie Lampkin transferring from TCU. They had some established players. They had the elite freshman Cody Williams as well. That was supposed to be a top 20 team. And Colorado is squarely on the bubble after losing at Washington State today. Oregon's in trouble after failing to get the win over Arizona. And let's keep in mind, like Arizona's the only lock right now. Utah is in the field, but still has some work to do. Utah is getting pounded by Washington right now as we speak. There are not many quality win opportunities for Oregon, for Colorado, for Washington State. And Arizona State is done. Arizona State got blown out by Oregon State in Corvallis. So stick a fork in the forks. The Pac-12 was supposed to have like 5-6 NCAA tournament teams. USC and UCLA were picked in the top 3 of the league, and they're both completely out of it. Their only chance is to win the Pac-12 tournament. Who thought we'd be here with that situation in the Pac-12? As great a send-off as Pac-12 football had in the very last Pac-12 football season, basketball, it's been absolutely brutal. Like it's just beyond description. Utah with Craig Smith has been the one really pleasant surprise, and Washington State under Kyle Smith doing more with less is in the bubble conversation, but would not be in the NCAA tournament today. Like the Cougars need to win like 5 in a row. Then we can talk about them as an at-large. But I mean, like they're at least doing something, after losing DJ Robin in the transfer portal to USC. Kyle Smith's taking leftovers, and like he's making more of a gourmet meal than Andy Enfield, than Mick Cronin, than a lot of other coaches in the Pac-12. Craig Smith is clearly the Pac-12 Coach of the Year right now.
And the Mountain West, again, it seems to have 2 or 3 teams that can maybe win a game or two, besides just San Diego State. Richard Pitino's New Mexico team is one of them. That Colorado State team had been good, but they took another loss. They lost to Wyoming in overtime, so they've taken some losses. But the Mountain West seems to be a much deeper, better conference. Listen, a lot of good West Coast stuff. There's no doubt.
I did. Yeah. You asked me about the Mountain West in addition to the Pac-12, and I didn't talk about the Mountain West. So let's talk about the Mountain West. Give me something
real quick. Yep. Give me something.
So Colorado State led Wyoming by 11 points with 53 seconds left and
Incredible.
Lost. And by the way, this is the most amazing fact from Saturday in college basketball. Get this. Colorado State against Wyoming, Villanova against Butler. They both led by 11 points with under 5 minutes left in regulation. They both led by 4 points with 2 minutes left in overtime. They both lost. That is just absolutely mind-blowing.
You said led by 11 with 53 seconds left for Colorado State.
Colorado State led by 11. Yeah, so we're talking Northern Iowa against Texas A&M in the NCAA tournament. Remember that one? That's on that scale. Yep. And
guys, me, you, TJ, and the Twins could have hung on them up 11. Jeez, make a free throw.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also in the Mountain West, Boise State led Utah State in the battle for first place. Boise State led Utah State by 7 midway through the second half and lost that game. Let that game slip away. So we just might have seen the telling moment in the Mountain West race with Utah State. Utah State's lost only twice. Utah State and New Mexico have lost only twice. So those two teams have definitely exceeded expectations. It'll be fascinating to see if San Diego State, the defending national runner-up, can make a charge at the Aggies and the Lobos down the stretch.
This man is a machine. He's the West Coast bureau chief. Follow him at Matt Zimick, TrojansWire.com. They're on the Andy Enfield watch. Just quick answer. Is he in any jeopardy of being fired during the season with how bad they are right now at 8-14? Quick answer.
He'll certainly finish out the season. And frankly, if you ask me, what will Jen Cohen, USC's athletic director, do? I think she comes back with Enfield for another year because of all the goodwill that he's built up. Politically, I think he will get another year. But in my mind, I think USC needs that upgrade. It needs to get its own Mick Cronin, from Steve Alford. I think, to me, when in terms of firing coaches, my philosophy has always been when it becomes clear that that you're extremely confident that a coach won't go beyond a certain ceiling or a certain threshold or standard, that's time. And the fact that he's been there, this will be when he completes this season, it'll be his 11th season. He's had time. He's had time to take this thing to the next level. This year was his chance. We're giving you Isaiah Collier, top recruit in the country, elite point guard, Boogie Ellis coming back, Kobe Johnson coming back, Vince Iwuchukwu, 5-star big man, DJ Rodman in the portal, Bronny James. What more are we supposed to give you?
How are you 8? I know Collier's hurt, but how are you 8-14 with that? Exactly.
How are you 2-7 in a bad Pac-12? The Pac-12 isn't even good. If the Pac-12 was the way it was in the late 90s with, Lute at U of A, Mike Montgomery, Mark Madsen at Stanford, and Jason Kidd at Cal, and all those guys, if it was a loaded Pac-10, Pac-12 the way it was back then in the 90s and you're getting dusted, that's one thing. But every Pac-12 team has at least 3 losses. You might have only 3 bids, maybe even only 2 in the NCAA tournament, and your last place. Yeah, USC needs the reset. USC needs to find itself a higher level coach. And again, I don't want to come across as being mean because Enfield has improved USC in the 10.5 years he's been there, done a good job overall, went to the Elite 8, 4 straight NCAA tournaments. He's done a lot of good things, but it's time to find the upgrade. It's time to find the guy who can take it to the next level.
This guy always takes it to the next level. Get out of here, get some rest, do whatever, because I know you got Australian Open tennis in your future while you've been waxing West Coast basketball with us. here
Who
on
you
the
got?
Saturday
Who you
Nightcap.
got? Is it Medvedev?
I mean, Sinner
Or
was
Sinner?
great against Djokovic. It's really hard to bet against him. He's definitely the more informed player. I just got to say, the Sunday morning of the Australian Open is one of my favorite days of the year because no more 3-hour naps from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. No more distorted sleep schedules.
Take the distorted 3-hour nap. We've kept you too long. Go take the distorted 3-hour nap now and do the Australian Open stuff. Thank you, Matt Zimick. We appreciate it. We look forward to leaning on you down the stretch in March, etc. And the Final Four, as we all know, is coming in your part of the world in the greater Phoenix area, Glendale, Arizona, coming up. Thank you on the Saturday Nightcap debut here for 2024. Thank you, my friend.
Great to talk to both of you.
There we go. There he goes. Jason Powers, you're going to hang with me here on the program for a few more moments. Again, whether you're catching us live on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, etc., thank you for hanging out, watching us either live or on a little bit of a delay, podcast form as well. All right, I had to look at this because he just told us about Colorado State and Wyoming. That's why I love Matt as a resource. So up 11 with 53 seconds left is absolutely correct. So we want to know the anatomy of how did that game get blown with 53 seconds left in the Mountain West Conference at Laramie, Wyoming. So the Cowboys make a layup. That cuts the lead to 9. So then I'm looking here. They actually turn the ball over. That turnover then leads to a quick hoop about 10 seconds later.
7.
The lead is now 7. Then there is a bricked front end of the 1-and-1. There always is, Jason Powers, in a 7-point game. Quick layup is 5 seconds later. Actually, a quick 3 is 5 seconds later. We're down to 4. Then a bricked front end of the 1-and-1 again leads to a Wyoming rebound, and they are fouled. What are you doing fouling up by 4? 2 made free throws by Wyoming, and in the span of about 40 seconds, they have cut it all the way down to 2. So then the end result is that Wyoming gets another opportunity, and they get a layup after a turnover. They get a layup at the buzzer to force the overtime. So 2 turnovers, 2 bricked front ends of the 1-and-1, and Wyoming erases an 11-point deficit in 53 seconds, gets the game into overtime, and beats Colorado State. And that's a bad loss for Colorado State at Wyoming. At least for right now, it's a bad loss. Wyoming was 10-9 coming into the game. How crazy is that? On a crazy day of overtimes, how crazy is that, Jason Powers? Quick reaction to that?
The old Jimmy V, foul him. Well, one of the amazing things is Colorado State's down 11, or Wyoming's down 11, and they weren't in the bonus. That Colorado State had to, they were in the 1-and-1 with that deep into the game that they were only shooting 1-and-1s. And then, usually when you're down that much, you fouled a bunch. The team's in the double bonus. And for them to only be in the 1-and-1 twice, not just once, but twice, and miss both front ends, that's pretty hard to do.
UNLV, by the way, has won tonight over San Jose State. Are they a fringe at-large team? Don't know. As Matt mentioned, Utah State won at Boise State tonight in the Mountain West in overtime. What else? We've had so many overtime games. Those teams are both probably in at the moment at large. Utah State, Boise State. Most bracketology, including our buddy Chris Daubertine of bloggingthebracket.com, has Utah State and Boise State in, along with San Diego State, along with New Mexico, along with Nevada, along with Colorado State. 5 or 6 teams out of the Mountain West to possibly be in this tournament. You know, one thing that he was saying, the old adage in terms of coaching, especially if it has gone bad, Jason Powers, is if it must be done inevitably, it should be done when? Immediately. That's the adage in coaching, right? Or else, if you keep letting Kenny Payne of Louisville run his team out there when it's obvious he has knuckled under and waved the white flag.
Not up for the job.
I know he's a former Louisville player and a former Louisville assistant, but he's been overwhelmed. It's obvious he's overwhelmed. They should have relieved him and fired him 2 or 3 weeks ago. They scored 13 points in the first half against Virginia today. They were behind 41-13 at the half. How much longer are they going to make Kenny Payne have to trot out his team and then explain why it's so awful, as opposed to apparently no one else on his staff is capable of being the interim coach, I guess, or they're wanting to torture him for whatever's left of his salary and let him go through the loss after loss after loss, horrific loss after horrific loss. They got a little better in the second half today, but you only had one way to go. Virginia was up 41-13 in the first half. So again, to that point, with Infield or anybody else, if you've decided he's not the guy, you are better to do it immediately than just continue to put everybody through it. And Louisville's a classic example of that, Jason Powers.
The question with Enfield is, and Matt makes a good point, has it gotten stale? Yes, but man, he's done a really good job over the course of his time there making USC relevant. They have not been relevant for a long time prior to him getting there, and he's had some good runs. I mean,
to your point,
is it a one bad year? Is it a one bad year deal with Enfield, or is this he's getting some players. The question is, can he coach them? We don't know that in full, but he's getting some players. The Louisville situation, I don't know what you do at Louisville. I mean, I think you got to get rid of Kenny Payne. I'm with you. But, man, I mean, starting with the Chris Mack hire, and that went south quickly, they've got to figure out a way to get a guy in there who can stabilize and can recruit.
Yeah, no doubt. And, again, on the infield situation, you did mention they're bringing in some players. USC maybe hasn't had 10 relevant seasons in their history in college basketball.
Right.
Probably not 10. They've been relevant for a while with him. Right. So you could do a lot worse, but has it run its course? We shall see on that. Speaking of running its course, apparently we've run our course here on the Saturday NightCap. Did I leave anything else out? You mentioned Kentucky. We talked the Blue Bloods. We talked Kansas. We talked the Duke controversy at the end. By the way, number 1 UConn is playing right away. About 12 and a half hours from now, as we do the show live, they're playing Xavier at home, noon, Hartford, noon Eastern time in the Big East. Number 2, Purdue is also in action in the Big Ten tomorrow. Before the big NFL games, tomorrow, Purdue is also in action in the Big Ten. And we didn't talk a lot about the Big Ten tonight. Illinois got a big win over Indiana. That game was on national cable on FS1. Illinois
night.
at home.
Yeah, no, tonight.
Illinois had to come from behind. They were down like 8 in the second half with Indiana. They came from behind and won the game with Indiana. So that's relevant, at least in the Big 12, or I'm sorry, in the Big 10 at this stage. Tomorrow, by the way, Purdue, I'm trying to get my game time. Purdue Rutgers is 1 Eastern time. So both number 1 and number 2 are in action, and both before the AFC Championship begins with Baltimore and Kansas City about 3:30 Eastern time. They'll play the games. They'll get them over with. Purdue is at the rack at Rutgers, and Rutgers beat them a year ago at Rutgers. You got to avoid the upset bug on Sunday, Jason Powers. What else? Anything else?
Is Mike Woodson in a little danger in Indiana? They have really mightily struggled, and he had some players coming back. And what do you think about the Terrence Shannon situation in Illinois getting reinstated? And controversial whether they should reinstate him or not after the alleged sexual assault charge. What your thoughts on Terrence Shannon in that Illinois situation?
Yeah. All right, so the first thing is on Indiana, they've had some injuries, but this is now year 3 for Woodson. Yeah. And by the way, you're better to speak to this than me, but I mean, we all know Indiana basketball is king. I mean, it's priority 1, 2, and 3 in the state of Indiana, and then maybe corn after that. So the fact that they are not Big Ten champs, much less contending to win the Big Ten, much less winning it, the fact that they are not at the Elite 8 Final 4 level, that's a big deal in that state, is it not? And they're nowhere close to that with Mike Woodson right now, right?
And Mike Woodson's one of their own too. He was a former player, and everybody thought he might be the answer. And he had a first good year and a half. But boy, the last year and a half has not been good. And they're not even playing well. I mean, they're losing games again. You're not going to win them all in that conference, but man, they're just sometimes not even being competitive in a couple of the games that I've watched. And it's concerning to me in Bloomington.
No doubt. And again, huge expectations there. And he's a former Knight disciple, of course, Indiana. All of the old guard, all of the older fans of Indiana still want the attachment to Bob Knight, and Woodson was a player in the 70s for Bob Knight. But I mean, there's legitimate questions right now that they have not become relevant in the Big Ten for sure. Indiana, and then you touched on the Terrence Shannon situation for Illinois. Again, we'll touch on this on the Saturday Nightcap, and we're going to get out of here in a moment or two. Shannon's situation is this. The incident happened in December. It happened in the Lawrence, Kansas area because Illinois was playing Kansas in basketball, or I'm sorry, in football. It happened in a nightclub. The allegation came to light in later in December, like a week later. He was indefinitely suspended. He has maintained his innocence. He has attorneys that are involved that have filed a federal restraining order, and he got the judge to agree, Shannon did, that Illinois did not follow proper procedure, due process, and that in doing so, they can't just leave him hanging indefinitely. They did not give him a hearing. They didn't follow their own Title IX rules. And so he got a federal judge to say to Illinois, you can't suspend the guy because you did not follow your own rules. Follow your own rules, and then maybe you can. And so it looks like now Illinois has backed off. He missed like Terrence Shannon, like 5 games. So that is punishment. By the way, they have a preliminary hearing in Kansas on the sexual assault charge, which has now been moved to May, which will be after his college basketball career is over, because this guy's likely a top 10 lottery pick. He's that kind of talent. So, I mean, Jason, where do you come down? I knocked the ball back over the net. We were talking tennis briefly with Matt Zimick. I knocked the ball back over the tennis net to you on he got some punishment. He got a judge to agree with him. What do you make of this? Because he's controversially back in there for Indiana. He made 6 straight free throws to help put the Illinois game away against Indiana tonight, Jason.
And he's a player they need. I mean, if they're going to be relevant down the stretch, he's going to be a huge player for them. And it's interesting that he basically got an injunction against the university for violating his due process rights, the student code of conduct, so to speak, of him being a student on that campus. And it's, that's probably a very delicate situation in that athletic department. The relationship between athletics and the academic side of the university is probably very, very touchy right now.
Well, but again, he has the right, and I understand we can't go for another 15 minutes. We do need to take accusations more seriously than what they've been taken in previous decades and previous times. But he does have the right to say, I didn't do this, and I should have due process under the rules and the law here at Illinois to continue to play or not. And if you don't follow those, hire some big-time lawyers, which he did. He hired a big-time Chicago lawyer to go before the federal judge, judge, to say they didn't follow their procedure. So Terrence Shannon is still eligible, and Illinois is still very much relevant. And there are a lot of people believe they can maybe win the Big Ten or the Big Ten tournament with him before it is over with here tonight. One other intriguing thing while we talk here about Sunday, I have been tonight wearing the Memphis Tiger. I'm showing it to the TV audience on podcast. You obviously can't see it. Memphis Tigers in American Conference action playing UAB Sunday afternoon in Birmingham, playing in the middle. Your guys, UAB, playing right in the middle of the AFC Championship game. Hello, ESPN. They want to televise some basketball. So that's going on Sunday. But with the American Conference, Memphis has taken a couple of hits, losing to USF, South Florida, losing then to Tulane. They got to get back on track here against UAB. We'll see. And Florida Atlantic, the darling a year ago that went into the Final Four, they're new to the conference, the American Conference. They've taken some losses in this league. This league appears to be a little more wide open with Charlotte, with USF, with Tulane, UAB lurking. I mean, you got some decent teams really in the American Conference. So again, Memphis will play UAB tomorrow, and I believe Florida Atlantic is also in action on Sunday afternoon as well in American. While the NFL games are going on, the American Conference is playing. Touch on the American real quick, and we'll get out of here.
You and I both know this. You went to Memphis, I went to UAB. That's always been a very competitive rivalry. It's 4 hours down the Birmingham to Memphis. Has always been a natural rivalry with the Gene Bartow connection. I think, and you're right. That's a conference where you could get easily probably 3, maybe 4 bids potentially.
I don't know if it gets more than 3, but right now,
but
out of Memphis and Florida Atlantic,
South
they appear
Florida,
safely
South
in.
Florida,
So does
South
somebody
Florida is
else?
legitimate. Yeah.
Do they sneak the 3rd bid? USF beats Texas San Antonio today. That is now 11 wins in 12 games. 11 wins in 12 games, including the win over Memphis. For them, they went up to Temple the other night and won in the closing moments. They won today over UTSA.
Won at Memphis down 20. Came back from 20 down at Memphis.
That is correct. By the way, Florida Atlantic's game is earlier than the AFC title game. They are playing at 1 Eastern time with North Texas. That may be a tough game. Florida Atlantic already with a conference loss to Charlotte. They still have the conference lead in the American. They still have John L. Davis. They still have Elijah Martin, the 1-2 punch at guard. Memphis with a bunch of transfers, including this left-handed guard forward David Jones. Can they get back on track? And how about USF with this kid, Kason Pryor? Pryor is a 6'10" big man, shoots about 85% from the foul line. He's the conference player of the week. He led the Memphis comeback for USF. Again, they've won 11 of 12 games. Amir Abdur-Rahim is the coach of the USF Bulls in Tampa, as they are now winning games in the American Conference and very much relevant. Will that league get a 3rd team in? Don't know. How about Matt Zimick saying that the West Coast Conference may only get 1 team in out of Gonzaga and St. Mary's? Gonzaga's had their hands full with Pacific. As we do the show live tonight, it looks like they're going to put them away. They're up 8 with about 3 minutes to go. But after what happened, Jason Powers to Colorado State with a minute left, how do we never say never? They were up 11 with 53 seconds left. So Gonzaga, an 8-point lead on the road at Pacific in Stockton, California, trying to hang on and win that game. Gonzaga still has to play St. Mary's both times in the regular season, but man, could there be an NCAA tournament without Gonzaga? It could happen, maybe.
A name to remember if things keep going bad at Indiana. Dusty May was an equipment manager under Bob Knight in Indiana, the FAU coach. So if things keep spiraling the wrong way in Bloomington, that name will be a very prominent name. That'll be in the offings up in Bloomington if things keep going the wrong way.
Listen, you did a great job hanging with me on the Saturday nightcap of college basketball coast to coast. That's the voice of Jason Powers. Follow him at JPO Sports, Powers on Sports Podcast. Gives me great insight. Matt Zimick was also with us. Love Matt's insight. Follow him at Matt Zimick, Zemek. He's also part of the TrojansWire.com, a USA Today family of college websites. USC taking the loss tonight to UCLA. Both of those teams came into the game below 500, and UCLA got the crosstown win. How about that? Crazy. We did some great stuff. We did some great stuff on this first Saturday nightcap, and I hope the fans enjoyed it. And maybe you're hearing us in podcast form after the fact. We'll do this again periodically on Saturday nights, especially when we get closer to March. Listen, great stuff, Jason Powers. Thank you. Keep up the great work. I appreciate you hanging with me and going back and forth with the great sport of college basketball. We'll recharge the batteries for some college hoops tomorrow, some NFL tomorrow, and much more. Look forward to it. Jason, thank you.
Sorry, you're not in San Francisco tomorrow for the NFC title game.
Oh, for the Buccaneers.
We wanted you to be there. We wanted you to be there.
It's the Detroit Lions. The Lions, who've never been to a Super Bowl, have a chance to go tomorrow.
Yep.
Or Patrick Mahomes has a chance to go for the 83rd time if they can beat the Baltimore Ravens. I'm exaggerating on that.
Have a good night with the. How'd the Twins? Real quick, how'd the Twins do today?
They did well. The Steinbrenner JV basketball team, Steinbrenner High School, named for the George Steinbrenner, got a couple of wins. Both Twins got in the scorebook. Both scored. They had a lot of fun.
Follow through on TV, on the podcast.
I love that. Jason Powers, thank you. And again, we thank you for watching. If you've been watching on YouTube, on Twitter, etc., for the Nightcap Show. If you're hearing us on podcast, we did this on video. College Basketball Coast to Coast YouTube. CBB Coast to Coast is the Twitter handle where it was also streaming live. podcast form on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify is College Basketball Coast to Coast. Much more programming coming, live, podcast form, live games, and much more. I am merely TJ Reeves. For my guests, Jason Powers and Matt Zimick, thank you for being with us here as part of the Saturday Nightcap on College Basketball Coast to Coast.